This is our third lesson in this unit. Remember that this unit is focusing on helping you to develop some basic skills that are required for your studies in biology. Here we are going to look at symmetry. But don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you always have our videos whenever they are released. Symmetry. For our objective, at the end of this lesson, the student would be able to describe the types of symmetry. Remember that we have looked at the microscope, and we have also looked at body orientations, also referred to as anatomical positions. And I want to believe you still remember everything we learned in both. Okay. I know that some of you already have some knowledge about lines of symmetry, as done in some other subjects like mathematics. Yes, if you know that, it is very good. If you don't know anything about symmetry too, no problem. We are going to help you to understand in here. Symmetry. And there are two definitions of symmetry that I want to look at. Biological symmetry refers to a correspondence of body parts in size, shape, and relative position on opposite sides of a dividing line, or distributed around a central point or axis. This is a definition from Britannica. Then we can take another definition from Wikipedia that says biological symmetry can be thought of as a balanced distribution of duplicate body parts or shapes within the body of an organism. Now, these are what somebody would describe as big words, but what do they actually mean? It's actually very simple. Right, so when we begin looking at them, you understand. But just remember the definitions we have given here as we proceed. So, types of symmetry. We would say that organisms are either bilaterally symmetrical, radially symmetrical, or in some cases the organisms are not symmetrical at all, so we refer to them as asymmetrical. We are going to pick these one after the other and look at them. So what are bilaterally symmetrical organisms? We would say that an organism or its body part is bilaterally symmetrical if it can be divided into two identical halves along only one plane. And here we are going to understand what symmetry actually is, because symmetry has got to do with dividing the body of the organism or part of the body of the organism into two identical halves. That is what symmetry is about. So if the organism can be divided into two identical halves, it means it is symmetrical. But if the body cannot be divided into two identical halves, it means it is asymmetrical. So now when we are looking at the organisms that can be divided, or their body parts that can be divided into two identical halves, then we talk about which ones are bilaterally symmetrical and which ones are radially symmetrical. So let's look at this. The definition says that if the organism is bilaterally symmetrical, it means the body can be divided into two identical halves, but the possibility of it is in only one plane. So what are we trying to say? For example, this cat, we can choose to split this cat into two, and the two that we're going to split it in must be identical. And what do we mean by being identical? It's like creating a mirrored image. If we use this line to divide the cat into two, we'll have one eye here and another eye here. We'll have one nostril here, another nostril here. The mouth will be split into two. The forelimbs will have one here and another here. The hind limb, there will be one here and another there. So this clearly shows that this organism is symmetrical because the body can be divided into two. Now, it is bilaterally symmetrical. Note this point. It is bilaterally symmetrical because we can only divide it into two by using only one dividing line, as the Britannica definition says. So it means that as we have split this cat into two using this line, there is no other line or there is no other plane that we can use to split it into two. For example, if we decide to use a line like this, well, you realize that we have the head on top here, but there will not be any head down here. There will be the limbs or the legs down here, but not on top here. So that means this line cannot give us the mirrored image, or it cannot give two identical halves. So the only line that we can use is this. So this makes the cat bilaterally symmetrical. Only one plane. Another example would be an insect, where you can use this line to divide its body into two and have them identical. Apart from this line, there is no other line. So it makes the insect bilaterally symmetrical. And there are so many other organisms that show bilateral symmetry. We can talk about insects, as I have given an example here, and many simple leaves show bilateral symmetry. Mango fruit, scorpion, lizard, fish, and many others. Now let's go to radially symmetrical organisms. An organism or its body part is radially symmetrical if it can be divided into two identical halves, but along more than one plane. So here we are looking at along more than one plane, right? The fact that it can be divided into two identical halves means it shows symmetry. But if it is radial, then it means that should be done along more than one plane. So let's look at an example like the starfish. The starfish can be divided into two identical halves using this line. So you see here, this side has been mirrored here, this side has been mirrored here, and even this side has been split into two. Right. But apart from this line, we can choose to use another line. And we are going to have them identical. Or we can use this line. We can also use this line. Finally, we can use this line. Right. So there are so many lines of symmetry. More than one. So it makes it radially symmetrical. Let's also consider the orange fruit. I can choose to cut the orange fruit this way to have it mirrored or to have two identical halves. I can also go this way, or I can go this way. In fact, there are so many directions that I can use, although I've only shown with only 3 of them. But you can cut it along so many planes where you are going to get them mirrored, or you are going to get two identical halves. So several organisms also show radial symmetry. Jellyfish, sea urchins, actinomorphic flowers, so many of them. Now finally, let's look at asymmetrical organisms or body parts. Of course, asymmetry simply means that the organism does not show any symmetry. So that's the description here. An organism is asymmetrical if its body cannot be divided into two identical halves. So let's look at an example like this. Here, although this is a simple leaf, but you will see that using this line to divide the leaf into two, there is a space here which is not mirrored on this part. And so that makes this leaf asymmetrical. Let's look at this snail also. Someone can decide to split the snail along this region, coming down here. But note that after dividing this snail into two, this part of the shell would not be mirrored at the other end, and so it makes it asymmetrical. Good. So that is what we have for this lesson. We have looked at symmetry, yes, and in looking at symmetry, we have looked at bilateral symmetry and radial symmetry. Organisms or their body parts that are bilaterally symmetrical can be divided into two identical halves along only one plane or by using only one dividing line. But those that are radially symmetrical can be divided into two identical halves, but that can be done in so many planes. But there are some organisms or their body parts that do not show symmetry at all, and they are referred to as asymmetrical. Good. So as we are ending, remember to answer these questions, and you can send your answers to me personally through the content that I'll provide or in the comment section. Okay, what type of symmetry would be observed about the following? First one is dog, sunflower, butterfly, leaf of maize plant, and fiddler crab. Okay, that ends our lesson. In our next lesson we are going to look at section, and that's also going to be another interesting and simple one. But don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you always have our videos. See you